I do see we got some books. Is there anybody in the class that needs a book? We've got, 9, 10, 11, 4 lessons left. If anybody needs one, raise your hand. Jesse will pass it out to you. There's also, it looks like, a few more books for the Wednesday night class as well. So if you're missing, if you don't have a Wednesday night one, you can pick that up from the front row. All right, we're continuing this morning in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, and the title of our lesson, it's on page 49, if you're following along in the book, is Today Matters. So we'll go ahead and read from the New King James first and then the New International before we begin our discussion. So Ecclesiastes chapter 9. For I considered all this in my heart, so that I could declare it all, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. People know neither love nor hatred by anything they see before them. All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes an oath, as he who fears an oath. There is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to all. Truly the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But for him who is joined to all the living, there is a hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, their hatred, and their envy have now perished. Never more will they have a share in anything done under the sun. Go eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. Let your garments always be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun. All your days of vanity, for that is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. For man also does not know his time, like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time, when it falls suddenly upon them. This wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with a few men in it, and a great king came against it, besieged it, and built great snares around it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that same poor man. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words of the wise spoken quietly should be heard, rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much. Then from the NIV. So I reflected on all this and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. As it is with the good, so it is with the sinful. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of people, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterward they join the dead. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. Go eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you are, understanding, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, Or does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned? But time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come, as fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare. So people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. I also saw under the sun this example of wisdom that greatly impressed me. There was once a small city with only a few people in it. And a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built a huge siege works against it. Now there lived in that city a man poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom. But nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength, but the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer heeded. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than the weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much. Okay, so as I said in the book, the title is Today Matters. And I like the little introduction that Wilson Adams had here on page 45. It says, if you've ever remodeled a house or added a room, you know the truth of these four realities. It takes longer than you planned. It costs more than you thought. It's messier than you anticipated, and it requires greater patience than you expected. It also necessitates a fifth reality. You must blast before you can build. And I thought that was pretty good. And he relates this to Solomon now, who's been blasting. He's been blasting at all of these ways of life, all these things under the sun that he's referred to as vanities. And he makes this list here. This is just a reminder of some of the things that we've seen so far of those, and these are descriptions of what we see in the world, isn't it? And we made this point. This was written a long time ago, but boy, it sure is all still relevant, isn't it? What we're seeing in Ecclesiastes now. So the things that we looked at as materialism, as he said, the one with the most toys wins. The playboy culture, if it feels good, do it. Humanism, I did it my way, or that's and excluding God. And finally, fatalism, which is kind of that there's nothing after this. You live, you die, the end. And I thought, when I was thinking about this, to me, this almost goes in reverse order as far as how it happens. If we're living and we don't believe there's anything after this life, if we don't, then obviously we're going to move into humanism, which is that we don't see any need for God because we don't believe there's an afterlife or a God. And so if all we got is what's here, then we're going to move into that, well, if it feels good, do it. Why not? What's to restrain me? Right, if this is all I got, I might as well live it up. And then finally, so if I'm living it up, I might as well get everything I can get. Right? And I win. Who gets the most wins. So, but I think it all starts there with when God is not included in folks' lives, it's sure easy to head down these paths that are described here. And that's been the point Solomon's been making all along, isn't it? When we've discussed his wisdom, and he's been cynical at times, but he always, it comes back to include God in your life, and things are going to be much better. So we see here, he makes the point here that in verse 9 that he reflected on all these things and concluded. So we're going to see several things here that he's concluded on. So the first section talks about the four great realities of life. And the first one is that God is in control. And he makes a reference here over into Hebrews, a passage I think we're all familiar with, from Hebrews 13 verses 5 and 6. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, neither will I leave you nor will I forsake you. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? So as we live our lives, it's important for us to include God and recognize that God is in our lives and God is working with us. His second reference there is to the passage in James, which tells us about, we should include God in our planning processes, right? When we're planning to do something, we should be including God, asking for wisdom about the decisions we're trying to make. But one thing I did think of, do you think that you can overuse this God is in control thing? I've seen some people that just kind of throw their hands up, say, well, and in throwing their hands up, they actually just don't do nothing. Well, I don't need to worry about voting because God's in control. Whoever gets elected, God was in control. Or something bad happens. And well, I guess God was in control with that, why that happened. So sometimes I think that we can maybe I don't know if overdo is the right word, but that we have a responsibility in life, don't we? So we have a responsibility to be God's hands and feet. Ever heard it described that way? It's our responsibility to understand God's will and submit to His will, and in a way we carry out His will, don't we? If somebody needs help, then we're here to help them. Well, is that God helping them? Well, through us, right? We have that opportunity and responsibility. So sometimes, I've just seen this where I've heard people that have come to the point of, well, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing because God's in control. What difference does it make? And I don't think we realize that's not the way He intended it. Norma, do you have a point?
In my life, the folks that I've run into in the denominational world kind of use it as an excuse. I'm waiting for God to, tell me something to do, and then I'll go ahead and do it. In the meantime, I'm just going to do what I want. and then some disaster happens in their life, they go, oh, praise God, for keeping me from dying after this drunken binge that I was on, and it just repeats that process. I'm not in control. It's God's fault if something happens to me, basically.
Yeah, I guess I missed the class on it, but I guess it was a couple Wednesday nights ago, part of the tulip thing or whatever it is, where I guess I haven't studied that a lot, but is it that you're just picked? Is that the way it works? That either you're picked or you're not? So what difference does it make? And that's kind of an ultimate God is in control thing there, isn't it? That I don't have a free will. It's either I'm picked or I'm not. And we understand that's not true. And as he says here, Solomon concludes that we are not mindless robots stumbling blindly through life. And that's Mar?
Since the beginning, God has desired a relationship with us. It's a partnership. It's a working with Him, with us to accomplish His will. It's not us and it's not all God. It's us working together according to His will.
Yeah, good point. Anybody else? All right. So his second point is death is certain. And he kind of makes the point that that's something that we don't like to talk about. And we have nice words for it, like passed away and asleep in Jesus or going on to your reward and things like that. But it's a fact, right? And that's something that we've talked about a couple of times before when he's referenced funerals and things like that. But we recognize that death is the ultimate equalizer. It's kind of what he's saying here, right? It's going to come to all of us, whether we're rich, poor, famous, not famous, good, bad, whatever. Unless Jesus comes back, then death is something that's going to come to it awaits everyone, and it sets perspective. It sets our perspective. But on the flip side, he in it being certain, and we understand that as he describes here, it's an evil, as Solomon points it out, and that it's the payment for, it's the wages of sin, and recognition that we're cut off from the tree of life. It's all the things that sin put into motion are finalized in death, right? In death, in our physical death. But the flip side of that, as it sets perspective, what did Jesus do for us when it comes to this? What does Hebrews say, Norma?
I don't know.
Go ahead.
But he gave us the hope that if we are obedient to Him and we have that relationship that Mara's talking about, that basically this isn't the end. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, in Hebrews he says he took away what? Remember? The sting, the fear, right? There's no need for us as Christians to fear death, is it? Now, it's something we don't know what it's going to be like, and it's an uncertainty, and so to have some apprehension about the process, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're in Christ, then death is just a doorway, isn't it? It's a doorway to be with God. Remember, Paul, what was Paul's attitude? He's kind of like, boy, I'd rather actually go ahead, but I need to hang around and help y'all out a little more. Wasn't that kind of his attitude? That there was a debate in his head. Would I be better off just going ahead and being with the Lord, or staying and working here on earth? So we can, even though we know it's certain, and that certainty needs to set perspective for our lives, right? That in how we live our lives, but it can also, it sets the certainty of eternal blessings as well, doesn't it? That we can look forward to what's beyond death. Go ahead, Norm.
And like you say, it also places a sense of urgency on our life, because we know it's certain. We know we only have one life here, and we know we're going to be judged based on what we do here. And so that sense of urgency is it puts it in. And the older you get, the more urgent that becomes.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that whole, but it's back to what we're saying. There's a certainty, but there's also a blessing. There's also a confidence in it if we're in the Lord. Right? So that's about, and I think that, don't you think that this is one of the big ways that we can shine our light as Christians to the world? To have a confidence, not an arrogance, but a confidence in death, that there's more. And there's blessings, and let me tell you about them as an opportunity to talk to folks, because a lot of people have that dead and it's over attitude, right? That they don't see anything more, and we can help them see more, and hopefully have an opportunity to lead them to Christ. Okay, anybody have any other comments on that one? All right. So the next one is, without God, man is mean and mad. And I thought about Romans 1. So I looked just a couple of verses from Romans 1, starting in verse 18. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may have been known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Then down to, that was verse 20, then down to verse 29. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossipers, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. And although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these things, but also approve those who practice them. And I think that's a pretty good description of mean and mad folks, don't you think? And obviously he was referencing the Gentiles there in Romans chapter 1. But we don't live in a nice world, do we? And what happened in Texas wasn't nice, was it? And we see examples going on daily of people that are doing bad things in our world, and innocent people suffer. And we don't like that, and we sure don't want to experience it, but it's a reality. It's a reality in our world, because our world has been messed up by sin, and these are the results for it. So the results of it. So again, it brings us back to what we were just talking about, of being in that prepared state, because you never know, do you? There's randomness that happens, there's evil that happens. We never know when our day could come. But if we're prepared, then it's something we can have confidence in, and not just worry about all the time. And as he makes the point here, that he says, the last sentence there in that section, perhaps the greatest evil and insanity of all this is, we know we're going to die and face God, and yet we give little thought and or preparation to it. And that is a scary thought, isn't it? When we have other verses about that facing God in an unsaved condition is not going to be a nice thing either, is it? And so when we see these folks in the world the point of Romans is there's people that even haven't heard the word should know better to some extent, right? Because of the qualities that God has shown them. But they're making the choice. Like that last verse, they do evil and they support evil as well. That's the choice that many folks have decided to make. And just back from our point of view, what I think Solomon is telling us is don't be surprised. That's the reality of it. And again, this was 3,000 years ago or so when this was written. It hadn't changed a bit. That's the reality in our world that we have to deal with. But don't just chalk it up to well, oh well. This is there's nothing more. Be confident in God and the hope that you can have in God, and that you can deal with those things as you would need to, because you have God as part of your life. And that kind of brings us to the next one. With God, there is hope. And he makes that quote there, a live dog is better than a dead lion. And he kind of, if you read the lesson, there's a little discussion there of the difference between dogs and lions in this society. But what's the point? As long as we're alive, what is there? There's hope. Right? There is still a time to make the right decision, isn't it? To make the right preparation. That we know we're going to die. He's already made that point. But as long as we're living, then we have the opportunity to do the right thing, to follow God, and also then to help others to follow God. I think for those of us sitting in this room, that's the more important point, that we have the opportunity to help motivate preparation in others, because as Norm said a minute ago, how many lives we get? One. And at the end of it, it's death, and then what? According to Hebrews, judgment that follows, right? We got one shot. We got one shot at this life, and we need to make the most of it. And then he comes to the conclusion of that the way we should. It leads us into our next section, that as a result, well, what can we do? This all sounds horrible. A lot of the things we've talked about. Well, what should we do? And we keep seeing this little theme come up, don't we? He brings it back to, what should we be doing with our lives?
Live the most today. Because it's all you've got.
Yeah, live today. And, excuse me, enjoy life while you can. Excuse me. Take advantage of every opportunity now. Don't put off what you can do now to the future. So that leads the next section. He entitled it, "How to Get the Most Out of Life." And in his introduction says, if we are alive, we have hope. So how do we respond to these inevitable and inescapable realities? Gloom and doom. Are you kidding? The chapter concludes with a look at the bright side of life as the wise man implores us to live with a great, big, enthusiastic smile. So his first point is to celebrate every moment. And that's a good point, isn't it? It's easy to get hung up in life, in the pressures of life and the rat race, as we call it, and miss some of these little moments, isn't it? That mean a whole lot more than the rat race will ever mean. That we should celebrate. We should celebrate those things and be thankful. Again, as a child of God, we have the confidence and to be thankful for the things that happen. The things that happen every day. Just look outside. Go stand out on the porch for a minute after Bible class. It's gorgeous out. Be thankful for that. That's something to celebrate, isn't it? We're moving out from spring to summer, and we've got the warmer weather coming in. Yeah, that's nice. It allows us to do things that we can't do during the winter. So it's a time we can enjoy things. And the next one is is be committed to your marriage. I thought that was kind of an interesting drop. He kind of dropped that in, and you might not expect it, but in verse 9, live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for this is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Now, when you read this, don't you almost want to say, Solomon, wait a minute. That means you have, 300 and 700? When you think about what the way he had approached this, in the end, he's admitting was totally wrong, didn't he? And we've talked about that in earlier lessons because he didn't follow God's will for the way it was supposed to be. And he's concluded, and he's bringing it back, though, in verse 9 here to what God's will is, isn't it? Live with a wife whom you love all the days of your life that God's given you under the sun, and there's blessing in that, isn't it? Into having a good spouse and being a good couple, and there's blessings in that we know that there's blessings in that given from God, because that's the way we were designed, wasn't it? From the very beginning, one man and one woman. That's the way we were designed to be. So when we're in the state that God has designed us to be, there's a pretty good chance we're going to be better off, isn't it? And following His wisdom. And then number C was give life 110%. And it comes back to that. Avoid the one of these days things. I think I've told you this before, but there's some things you just never forget. There's a guy, I was growing up when Rhonda and I were dating in Jackson Heights in Columbia. His name was Pete Bondra. And he told me, Jeff, don't wait till you retire to do things. He said, I thought that's what I planned to do, and as soon as I retired, I got sick and never got to do what I wanted to do. So, and his point was, live life along the way. I think especially sometimes we can get so caught up in careers, and obviously we need to work and provide for our family. Nothing wrong with that. But I'll do this when I retire, or I'll do that in a few years, and that's probably not the wisest way to live. It's more wise to have fun along the way. It's good to save, but you don't need to save everything. Spend a little money, have a little fun, enjoy yourself. And that's, again, we see this theme coming up multiple times now in Ecclesiastes, that there's nothing wrong with enjoying our life. With enjoying our life here, with that caveat of what? We're including God in it. So a life that includes God in it is something to be enjoyed. It's something that we should live. We should live our life. And as he says here, give it all you got. And finally, number D, be satisfied with who you are. Why do you think that's important? Is that important? You know what I mean?
The contentment, and this is not like be satisfied with who you are and never grow, because otherwise we'd still be babies, right? But we're talking about appreciating where you are today, and it helps us to come to the realization of what we've done to get there, and in planning ahead, what we need to do to go to the next place. And then if you're moving in the right direction with God, walking with God, then you will be content where you are today.
And I think that, and when we think about this, what we tend to do, and I think all of us have probably done this, is when what do we do when we start comparing ourselves? Who do we typically compare ourselves to? And the ones that are better than us, we don't tend to look the other way, do we? Of the folks that we've got a lot better than. But we like to look at the ones that we see, at least in our own minds, that they have it better than us. And that can cause problems. We do that. Go ahead, Gil.
One thing I like to think of is, or a phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. if we compare it to someone else, then it's going to take away our joy because we want more.
If y'all hear that, he said, comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah, that's a good statement. And you know, this is something I think it's very important that we teach our children, isn't it? That, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having goals. There's nothing wrong with trying to be the best that you can be, but you're not a failure if you don't end up a pro athlete or something to that extent. That doesn't make you a failure at soccer or baseball or whatever because you never become a pro in it if you've given it the best that you can give it. And don't you think that this can be especially true for young girls in the picture that our society paints of what a woman is supposed to be and what a woman is supposed to look like? That this can be a big deal and cause lots of lacks of confidence and even eating disorders and all the things that we see that can happen because of this picture that society has put out there of what a woman should look like. Yeah, we need to teach our kids that God made us all, right? And we're all beautiful in God's eyes, and we all have different qualities. And our diversity is really what makes things good. You know, it's good that all of us don't think alike and don't look alike, because that brings variety and it brings a diversity of thought into things that's a lot of times is powerful. As far as we hear it a lot in our company, and unfortunately, a lot of times it has to do with sexual orientation and things like that are considered diversity. But when you think about what really is diverse between males and females in different cultures, when you can pull that together and bring the strengths of all of that together, it's powerful. And that's true in the church as well, right? We need to consider, how did Paul describe us? Are we all arms? No, we're a body. Right? We're a body, and we all serve different functions. And we need to strive to do the best we can do, but to be satisfied with the function that we're serving. Mara?
About don't wait until you're retired to have fun. I believe that could also be applied to Christianity. Don't wait until you're married. Don't wait until you have kids. Don't wait until you are retired to serve God where you are and make an impact. I've known so many people my age who are not married or don't have kids, and they think that they're useless. They have all the time to be devoted to teach. That they are so useful. Don't wait to serve God where you are now.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That no matter where we are, God's got something for us to do, doesn't He? And a place for us. Erica?
On the heels of that, and your thoughts as well, this whole section where it's talking, comparing like we have hope, to a life God, and it goes on and he says, enjoy life now, because we do have that hope nuzzled in there in verse 7. He says, for God has already approved your works. So people in the world can have that philosophy of, well, we're going to die anyways, just, kind of, you hear blow and go, just spend your money, have a good time, eat and be merry. But here the focus is, you are working for God. And with that confidence, you should enjoy the blessings you have. And that reminds me of in Ephesians 4, we learned that when we work, we're also supposed to share and give to others who have a need. So we don't need to just enjoy those blessings that we have now, but we also need to make sure that we're working for the Lord and sharing those blessings with others.
Good morning. Anybody else? All right, then his conclusion here. We got 10 minutes left, so we'll read through this and then get into our questions. Verses 12 through 18 remind us, our end will come suddenly when we least expect it. The mind will win over muscle, although the value of wisdom is sometimes lost. Quiet wisdom speaks louder than anything, and one person's selfishness can destroy much good. And then his conclusion, today matters, so make it matter. But just from that section, though, that little story about the man, and how that whole thing about quiet wisdom, and then in verse verse 17, the quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools. And I think we've all ran across, we've all ran across this, hadn't we? Where somebody is loud, and in their loudness they think they're wise, and they try to run things because they're loud, and that, you know, what's the guy, the old commercial, is it E.F. Hutton? Is that the right word? When some guy when he speaks, people listen. You know, and with the implication being, I remember people used to say that about Mike Thompson, that he didn't say a lot, but when he said something, it was worthwhile, and you should listen. You should listen, and that's definitely a way to be. Then in verse 18, wisdom is better than weapons of war. You know, in how the application of wisdom can diffuse a lot of issues, can't it? Where getting loud just makes them get worse. So it's difficult sometimes to step back and deal with things that way, but when we can, it's typically going to work out for the better. All right, let's get into our questions. So, number one, every day we get to choose our attitude, our priorities, our thinking, our commitments, our faith, our relationships, our values, and our areas of improvement. And guess what? Tomorrow we get to do it all over again. That's why each day matters. It's too late for yesterday. You can't depend on tomorrow. You have one day. Today it matters. Discuss the principle that you will never change your life until you change what you do daily. So why is that important? Norway?
We can only, God built us, so we can only do one thing at a time, one thought, one action, one movement. We add pounds onto our body by one hamburger at a time. All these things are all in ones, and we can only do one thing at a time. Insanity is defined as, thinking about two things at the same time. It is the way we're built, and we tend to, because it's so common, we tend to overlook the power of it. But the power is in that right decision making, one action at a time, moving forward.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've heard insanity defined as doing the same thing over and over and thinking you're going to get different results. Mm-hmm. So the only way you're going to change your life is to change what you're doing. Like he says here, change your habits, and then things you can change your life.
It reminds me of what Jesus said in Luke chapter 16, verse 10. He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much, and he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. And it goes to demonstrate that you have to start somewhere, and you build up from a smaller point. And I think this applies in the same way.
And we've talked about a little bit this in previous lessons. What can we do about yesterday? Not a thing, right? But some people let yesterday bind them, don't they? And hold them back. And then, our other habit is, I'll put that off till tomorrow, right? Well, then it never happens. But today is the day that we can do something, and that's the point, that we take today and make it matter. All right, number two. How have you seen people make a mess of their lives in living one or more of the four common life philosophies? So I thought about trying to bring this back to Bible examples. So who can you think of? There's Solomon hits a bunch of these, but materialism. Think of an example of somebody that loved their riches. Howard Hughes. What about in the Bible? Judas was one. What about the rich young ruler? Yeah. What about the playboy culture? Obviously, Solomon's probably the ultimate example of this one. Anybody else you can think of in the Bible? That prodigal son? Yeah. Samson. Yeah. What about humanism? This is that there's no God or no need for God. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Pharaoh. We saw in New Testament the Gnostics, some of the stuff that they believed, and even what about the Pharisees? Yeah, sometimes they got hung up in, maybe it's not quite humanism, but traditions they were really hung up in, wasn't they? Instead of the will of God. Teresa?
I think the earliest example is Cain. He wanted to do the offering his way.
Yeah, good point. All right, what about fatalism? What about the Sadducees? They didn't believe in a resurrection. Right? That's pretty much you dead, you done, isn't it? Yeah, and obviously we can look throughout and see people that live their lives in a way where they obviously weren't considering God. According to verse 1, what truth should guide us?
Or life is in the hands of God.
Yeah, our life is in the hands of God. So number 4, what do all men have in common? Death. What else? I won't say taxes, but I guess that is one. Well, if they have death, what did they have before death? Life, right? That we have life. So, and as we said, so what then does, if we're having life, what does that mean we all have? An opportunity, right? That yes, we're all going to die. That we have that in common, but we also all have an opportunity to make decisions on how we're going to live our lives, whether we're going to live our lives for God or not. Number 5, given the busyness of life, how can I prioritize my spouse?
For just visiting, dates, intimacy, etc.
Eric?
I was told by an older woman one time that as a wife, when you wake up in the morning, if your husband specifically asked you or told you something he wanted to do during that day, that you should prioritize that on the top of your list, so that way that doesn't fall through the cracks in your day.
Right. I mean, it comes back to the question almost, doesn't it? How to prioritize that? If you want to have a good marriage and have a good relationship with your spouse or God or anybody else, it takes some time, doesn't it? It has to be a priority. Number 6, we need to stop making excuses regarding life. I'm waiting until my house is paid off, until my kids leave for college, until I lose weight, until I get married, until I retire, until summer, until spring, until fall, until winter. Solomon advises us to stop waiting to live. Why? Enjoy it now. That's the whole point of this lesson, right? Gil? Yeah, you never know when it's the end of it is. Number 7. Life is like eating corn on the cob. You can be bashfully inconspicuous and neat about it, or you can pick it up with your fingers and bite in without reservation, all the while enjoying every drop of buttery juice that runs down your chin. Which approach does Solomon recommend? So, yeah, and I think that, don't you think really that the answer to this is that which way you prefer? Some people like eating it the messy way. Some people like cutting it off with a knife and eating it with a fork, or somewhere's in between. But we can all enjoy the corn, but we should do it the way that brings us enjoyment. And finally, number 8. On a scale of 1 to 10, least to greatest, what kind of day did you have today? Well, hopefully it's been a good one so far. And what did you learn today that will make tomorrow better? So obviously let's apply that to another day. What can we learn to make tomorrow better? Appreciate it. Put God first every day. Right? All right, well, thank you for your participation. So next week we'll be meeting, right? So we will not have a class next week. So the week following will be lesson 10.